The dirt hadn't even settled on my sister's grave when my phone vibrated against the damp fabric of my black wool coat. It was her boss. "Clara," his voice trembled, stripped of all its usual corporate authority. "Leave the reception. Come to the office right now. You need to see this." It was the kind of miserable, bone-chilling Seattle Tuesday where the sky looked like a bruised plum, and the rain never quite stopped, just shifted between a heavy mist and a punishing downpour. It was a fitting backdrop for the worst day of my life. My older sister, Bethany, was dead at 32. Standing by the open plot at Oakwood Cemetery, I felt entirely hollowed out. Bethany was my anchor. When our parents passed away within a year of each other a decade ago, she had stepped up, shielding me from the worst of the grief and managing the complicated probate process so I could finish college. She was fierce, fiercely intelligent, and possessed a quiet strength that made everyone around her feel safe. A week ago, that strength was snuffed out on a rain-slicked stretch of Interstate 5. The police report called it a tragic accident, a blown tire, a hydroplane, and a concrete barrier. As the priest droned on with empty platitudes about angels and better places, my eyes locked onto Gregory Hayes. Gregory was Bethany's husband of 3 years. To the rest of the world, he was a grieving widow, a tragic romantic figure standing at the edge of the abyss. He was handsome in that aggressively polished way, sharp jaw, meticulously styled hair that somehow looked perfect even in the damp air, and an expensive custom black suit. He was currently weeping into a monogrammed handkerchief, occasionally leaning on the shoulder of Vanessa Croft, his best friend from his real estate firm. Something about Gregory's grief felt horribly choreographed. Maybe it was the way he subtly checked his Rolex while dabbing his eyes, or the way Vanessa's hand lingered just a second too long on his lower back. I had never liked Gregory. He always felt like a shiny sports car with a faulty transmission, flashy, expensive, but ultimately unreliable. Bethany, however, loved him deeply, or at least she had. In the months leading up to her death, I had noticed a shift. The sparkle in her eyes had dulled. She dodged my questions, frequently canceled our Sunday coffee dates, and looked exhausted. Whenever I pressed her, she would force a smile and say, "Gregory and I are just working through some financial stress, Clara. It's nothing I can't handle." I should have pushed harder. God, I should have pushed. The funeral procession eventually moved from the muddy graveyard to the damp, fluorescent-lit basement of the local parish for the reception. The air smelled of stale coffee, wet wool, and cheap egg salad sandwiches. I stood in the corner, clutching a styrofoam cup of tea, nodding numbly as extended family members I hadn't seen in years offered their condolences. "She was too young, Clara," Aunt Beatrice sniffled, patting my arm with a clammy hand. "And poor Gregory. He looks absolutely devastated. Did you see him holding it together for the eulogy?" "Yes, Beatrice. A real trooper," I replied, the sarcasm entirely lost on her. I scanned the room. Gregory was holding court near the dessert table. He wasn't crying anymore. In fact, he was holding a hushed, intense conversation with a man I recognized as his lawyer, Arthur Higgins. Why was he talking to a lawyer at his wife's wake? I was about to march over there and demand an explanation when my phone began to buzz violently in my coat pocket. I pulled it out and frowned at the caller ID. Richard Sterling. Richard was the CEO of Sterling Co. Logistics, where Bethany had worked as an executive operations manager for the last 6 years. He was a gruff, old-school businessman in his late 60s who absolutely adored my sister. He had always credited her meticulous organization and sharp instincts with keeping his company afloat during the supply chain crisis. I had expected him to be sitting in the front row at the church, but he hadn't shown up. I slipped out of the noisy hall and into a quiet, drafty corridor near the restrooms, pressing the phone to my ear. "Mr. Sterling? I missed you at the service," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Clara." He breathed heavily into the receiver. He didn't offer condolences. He didn't say hello. His voice was laced with a raw, undeniable panic that sent an immediate spike of adrenaline through my chest. "Clara, are you still at the church?" "Yes, the reception just started." "Leave," he interrupted, his tone sharp and urgent. Make an excuse. Go out the back door if you have to. You need to come to the office right now. Mr. Sterling, what are you talking about? I can't just leave my sister's wake. People are... Clara, please listen to me. His voice cracked. A terrifying sound coming from a man usually made of iron. I came to the office today to pack up Bethany's desk. I couldn't bear the thought of some intern doing it on Monday. I was looking for the master keycard, and, Clara, I found something. She left something for you. My blood ran cold. Left something for me? What is it? I can't talk about it over the phone, he whispered, sounding as if he was afraid someone was listening to him. Just get here. Don't tell Gregory where you are going. Do you understand me? Do not tell Gregory. The line went dead. I stood in the flickering fluorescent light of the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Do not tell Gregory. I peeked back into the reception hall. Gregory was now laughing a short, muffled chuckle at something Vanessa had whispered in his ear. The sight of it made bile rise in my throat. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't grab an umbrella. I walked straight out the side exit, got into my ancient Honda Civic, and sped out of the church parking lot, leaving the morning charade behind. The drive to the Sterling & Co. building took 20 agonizing minutes. The rain lashed against my windshield, my wipers fighting a losing battle against the deluge. My mind raced through 1,000 terrifying possibilities. Had Bethany been embezzling money? No. She was the most honest person I knew. Was she having an affair with Richard? Absolutely not. He was like a second father to her. I pulled into the empty, rain-slicked parking lot of the commercial park. The large glass building was entirely dark, save for one illuminated window on the third floor, Bethany's office. The front doors were locked, but as I approached the glass, Richard appeared from the shadows of the lobby and pushed the heavy door open. He looked awful. His tie was loosened, his face was pale and drawn, and his hands were physically trembling. "Thank God," he breathed, ushering me inside and locking the door behind me. The silence of the empty corporate building was oppressive. "I'm so sorry to pull you away, Clara. I truly am." "Mr. Sterling, what is going on?" I demanded, my voice echoing slightly in the dark lobby. "You're scaring me." "Follow me," was all he said. We took the elevator in silence to the third floor. He led me past a maze of empty cubicles to Bethany's corner office. The door was open. Inside, cardboard boxes were half filled with her belongings, framed photos of the two of us, her favorite coffee mug, her specialized ergonomic keyboard. But my eyes were immediately drawn to her large mahogany desk. The bottom right drawer had been pulled all the way out and rested on the floor. Bethany was. She was brilliant, Richard started, pacing nervously behind the desk. "A few years ago, we had an issue with corporate espionage. A rival firm was trying to steal our client lists. Bethany took it upon herself to secure our physical files. She had the company carpenter modify her desk. Built a false bottom into that heavy drawer for sensitive documents." He pointed to the drawer on the floor. The wooden panel that usually lined the bottom was pried up, revealing a hidden compartment beneath it. "I only knew about it because she told me," Richard continued, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I needed the master passwords for the server today. I knew she kept them in a lockbox down there. So I opened it." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of sorrow and horror. He walked over to the desk and picked up a thick, brown manila envelope. On the front, written in Bethany's elegant, unmistakable cursive, were 3 words: "For Clara. Urgently." My breath hitched. My hands shook as I reached out and took the envelope from Richard. It felt heavy, too heavy. "Open it," Richard said softly. "I haven't looked at the files on the drive, but I read the letter. Clara, I don't think your sister's crash was an accident." I tore the top of the envelope open. A small, black USB flash drive tumbled out onto the desk with a clatter. Inside was also a stack of printed papers, and a handwritten letter on her customized stationery. I unfolded the letter. The date at the top was exactly 4 days before she died. "Clara, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. I know you think I've been distant lately. I'm so sorry for pushing you away, but I had to keep you safe from him. Gregory is not the man we thought he was. He is a monster. Is greater than. A few months ago, I noticed discrepancies in our joint accounts. I started digging. Clara, Gregory is drowning in debt. Not normal debt. Illegal, terrifying debt. He got involved with a syndicate running high-stakes offshore gambling rings. He owes them over $1 million, and they have been threatening him. But that isn't the worst part. I found out last week that Gregory took out a massive life insurance policy on me 3 months ago. Payout, $2.5 million. He forged my signature on the medical declarations. When I confronted him about the money missing from my trust fund last week, he looked at me with this dead, cold expression. He told me to drop it if I knew what was good for me. Is greater than I've been terrified, Clara. I hired a private investigator. The drive contains everything the bank transfers, the forged insurance documents, the photos of him with the loan sharks, and the proof that he has been draining my accounts to pay them off. He's also been sleeping with Vanessa Croft for 2 years. They are in on it together. I am going to the police tomorrow morning. I've packed a bag, and I'm leaving him tonight. But if I don't make it to tomorrow, please, Clara, destroy him. I love you always, Bethany. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the office. I read the letter twice, my brain refusing to process the words. Murder. My sister was murdered. The blown tire, the hydroplane, the concrete barrier. It wasn't a tragic act of nature. It was an execution. A tear slipped down my cheek, splashing onto the ink of her signature. Then another. But the tears weren't born of grief anymore. The hollow sorrow that had consumed me at the graveyard vanished, entirely replaced by a white-hot, blinding rage. Mr. Sterling, I whispered, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Do you have a laptop? He nodded, silently turning Bethany's work laptop around to face me and logging in. I picked up the black flash drive and slotted it into the port. A folder popped up on the screen labeled Gregory, Evidence. I clicked it open. There were dozens of subfolders, bank statements, insurance policies, PI photos, audio. I clicked on the audio folder. There was one file in it, named Dashcam, Backup Oct12, October 12th, the night she died. Bethany had a smart dashcam, Richard murmured, looking over my shoulder. It auto-syncs audio and video to her personal cloud server whenever the car is running. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear my sister's final moments, but I had to know. I clicked play. First, there was just the sound of heavy rain hitting the windshield and the low hum of the car engine. Then, Bethany's voice, tight with panic, filling the silent office. "Come on, pick up, she muttered on the recording. The sound of a ringing phone played through the car speakers. Then, Gregory's voice answered, "Hello, darling. Are you on your way home?" His tone was chillingly calm, smug, even. "Gregory, what did you do?" Bethany cried out, the engine revving louder. "My dashboard is flashing. The brake pedal is going straight to the floor. What did you do to my car?" A dark, terrifying chuckle echoed from Gregory on the recording. "You shouldn't have gone digging in my office, Beth. I told you to leave it alone. The insurance company pays out double for accidental death in a vehicle. Give my regards to your parents." "Gregory, please, I can't stop. I'm on the decline near Route 9. Please." The line went dead on the recording. There was the sound of Bethany sobbing, the frantic pumping of a useless brake pedal, the screeching of tires trying to grip wet asphalt, and then I slammed my hand down on the keyboard, pausing the audio just before the inevitable impact. I stood there, staring at the frozen screen, my chest heaving. Gregory had cut her brakes. He had listened to her panic. He had killed her, and then stood over her grave, crying fake tears and playing the victim while holding hands with his mistress. "Clara," Richard said, his voice breaking. "We need to call the police, right now. We have the proof." I looked at the drive. I looked at the letter. If I handed this to the police, Gregory would be arrested. He would hire Arthur Higgins, his expensive lawyer. He would drag it out in court for years. He would use Bethany's money to defend himself. "No," I said, my voice eerily calm as I pulled the flash drive from the laptop and slipped it into my pocket. "No?" Richard asked, baffled. "Clara, he murdered her." "I know he did," I said, turning to face him. "And the police will get their hands on this, Mr. Sterling. I promise you that." But not today. Today, he gets to think he won. Today, he gets to sleep soundly in my sister's bed, thinking he is a millionaire. I picked up Bethany's letter and carefully folded it back into the envelope. "He took everything from me," I said, staring out the rain-streaked window toward the direction of the church. "Jail is too easy. First, I'm going to take everything from him. I'm going to tear his life apart, piece by piece, until he has absolutely nothing left, and I know exactly where to start." The morning after the funeral, Seattle was bathed in a deceptive, pale sunlight that made the wet pavement gleam. I hadn't slept a wink. My dining room table was entirely covered in the contents of Bethany's flash drive, printed out and organized into damning piles. To take down a man like Gregory Hayes, I couldn't just strike him. I had to systematically dismantle the pillars of his arrogant life. Pillar 1, his career and his reputation. Pillar 2, his mistress. Pillar 3, his money. I started with the private investigator Bethany had hired. His name was Harrison Cole, a former fraud detective whose contact information was conveniently saved in a secure text file on the drive. When I called him at 7 a.m. and told him Bethany had been killed, the silence on the line was heavy. "She told me she was going to the police today," Harrison rasped, his voice rough with sleep and sudden shock. "I told her not to wait." "Damn it, Clara. I told her he was escalating." "She left me everything." "Harrison," I said, staring at a glossy photograph of Gregory and Vanessa Croft, kissing outside a high-end boutique. "I need your help, but we aren't going to the police." "Not yet. First, we are going to burn his life to the ground. Will you help me?" He didn't hesitate. "Tell me what you need." Gregory and Vanessa worked as senior partners at Sterling Oaks Real Estate, no relation to Richard's logistics firm, a luxury brokerage that prided itself on impeccable ethics and high net worth clients. According to Harrison's financial digging, Gregory hadn't just been draining Bethany's accounts to pay off his syndicate debt. He and Vanessa had been skimming earnest money deposits from off-market escrow accounts to keep the loan sharks at bay, doctoring the ledgers to hide their tracks. By 9 a.m., Harrison had used his specialized software to bypass the brokerage's firewall, spoofing an email from an anonymous whistleblower. We didn't just send the evidence to the firm's managing directors. We sent the escrow ledgers, the bank transfer receipts, and the explicit photos of Gregory and Vanessa to the entire company directory, every broker, every assistant, and every major client currently under contract. But I didn't stop there. Vanessa Croft was married to a prominent cardiothoracic surgeon named David. I had Harrison courier a physical binder of the affair and the financial crimes directly to David's hospital office, marked highly confidential, legal matter. At 10:30 a.m., I drove to the Sterling Oaks building and parked across the street. I wanted to watch. The fallout was spectacular and immediate. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the second-story office, I saw the chaos erupt. People were standing outside their cubicles, staring at their monitors. I watched Gregory, wearing a sharp navy suit, confidently strut out of an elevator, only to be immediately intercepted by two massive security guards. A moment later, the firm's senior managing partner, a terrifyingly stern woman, marched up to Gregory. Even from the street, I could see the vein bulging in her neck. She threw a stack of printed papers right into his chest. Gregory's arrogant posture instantly crumbled. He scrambled to pick up the papers, his face draining of color as he looked at the escrow ledgers. Vanessa appeared from a side hallway, crying hysterically, clutching her phone. I could only assume David had received his special delivery. The security guards grabbed both Gregory and Vanessa by their arms, physically escorting them out of the building. They were unceremoniously dumped onto the sidewalk, holding cardboard boxes of their personal effects. Vanessa was screaming at Gregory, slapping his chest, blaming him. He looked like a drowning man, wildly looking around as if expecting a lifeboat that would never come. Pillars 1 and 2, destroyed. I rolled down my window just an inch, breathing in the crisp morning air. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Harrison. Phase 1 complete. David Croft just filed for an emergency freeze on his and Vanessa's joint assets. She's penniless. I smiled. It was a cold, fractured smile, but it was the first time I had felt anything resembling joy since Bethany died. Now, It was time for the third pillar: the money. Gregory's entire murderous plan hinged on one thing: the $2.5 million life insurance payout. He needed that money to pay off the syndicate, keep himself out of a shallow grave, and start a new life. At 1 p.m., I walked into the local branch of Zenith Mutual, the company holding Bethany's life insurance policy. I didn't make a scene. I simply asked to speak to their lead fraud investigator. When a skeptical-looking man named Arthur Pendleton Arthur Higgins was Gregory's lawyer. Let's call the investigator Thomas Vance No. Thomas Reed ushered me into his office. I handed him a single, heavily encrypted flash drive. My sister Bethany Hayes died in a car crash last week, I told Thomas, my voice steady. Her husband, Gregory Hayes, filed a claim for a $2.5 million payout. I am officially contesting the claim on the grounds of insurance fraud and homicide. Thomas Reed raised an eyebrow, clearly used to grieving family members, making wild accusations about money. Miss Clara, I understand you are grieving, but the police ruled it an accidental collision. Listen to the audio file labeled Dashcam, Backup, Oct 12, I interrupted, staring him dead in the eye, and then look at the forged medical signatures in folder 3. He took this policy out without her knowledge, and he cut her brake lines. The proof is on that drive. Thomas plugged the drive in. I watched his face shift from professional skepticism to absolute unadulterated horror as Bethany's final panicked words filled his small office, followed by Gregory's chilling laugh. He paused the recording, his hand physically shaking as he reached for his desk phone. Miss Clara, I am freezing this payout immediately. I have to call the authorities. We need to hand this over to the homicide division. I know, I said softly, but I need you to do one thing for me first. I need you to officially notify Gregory Hayes that his claim has been flagged for criminal fraud and the payout is permanently suspended. I want him to know the money is gone. Thomas nodded gravely. Standard procedure dictates we notify the claimant of a freeze immediately anyway. I'll send the email and the certified letter right now. I left the insurance building feeling lighter, though a dark, jagged pit of anxiety still sat in my stomach. The police were going to be involved now. The clock was ticking. By 4 p.m., Gregory was a desperate, cornered animal. Harrison had managed to clone Gregory's phone using the Wi-Fi network at his now former office, giving us read-only access to his text messages. We sat in Harrison's dimly lit office, watching the texts roll in on a burner monitor. The messages told a story of utter panic. Asterisk 3:15 p.m. Gregory to Vanessa. Pick up the phone. My cards are declining. David froze your accounts too? We need to pool our cash. Asterisk 3:20 p.m. Vanessa to Gregory. Don't ever contact me again. My lawyer says if I testify against you for the escrow theft, I stay out of jail. Burn in hell, Greg. Asterisk 3:45 p.m. Gregory to Arthur Higgins. Lawyer. Arthur, Zenith Mutual, just froze the life insurance payout. They are citing a fraud investigation. You need to fix this now. I need that money by Friday. Asterisk 3:50 p.m. Arthur Higgins to Gregory. I just saw the news about your termination at Sterling Oaks. My retainer requires a $50,000 top-up for criminal defense. Wire the funds or seek other counsel. He has nothing, Harrison muttered, leaning back in his chair and watching the screen. He's radioactive. No job, no mistress, no lawyer, and the insurance money is locked in a vault he'll never open. Not nothing, I corrected, my eyes glued to the screen. He still has a massive debt to very dangerous people, and they don't care that his insurance claim got denied. Right on cue, a new message popped up on the monitor. It was from an unsaved number, but Harrison's reverse lookup software had already flagged it as belonging to a burner phone connected to a known enforcer for the local syndicate, a man named Silas. Asterisk 4:30 p.m. Unknown number, Silas. Word on the street is you lost your job today, Hayes, and a little birdie told my boss your dead wife's insurance payout got frozen. You owe us $1.2 million with interest. You have 24 hours to produce the cash, or we collect it in flesh. Don't try to run. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The little birdie was Harrison, of course. We had anonymously tipped off the syndicate about Gregory's frozen assets to ensure they knew he couldn't pay them. "The trap is set," Harrison said, looking at me with a mixture of respect and concern. "The police will have the warrant for his arrest by tomorrow morning based on the dashcam audio. But Silas and his crew might get to him tonight. Clara, this is going to get violent." "I know," I said, standing up and grabbing my coat. "Bethany's death was violent." It's time Gregory felt exactly what she felt in those final moments. Pure, unadulterated terror. I walked out of Harrison's office into the fading Seattle twilight. Gregory was currently hiding in the large, 5-bedroom house he had shared with my sister, the house he thought he was going to own free and clear. I started my car. I wasn't going to let the police or the syndicate handle the final blow without looking him in the eye myself. I had a house key, and I had a few things left to say to the man who murdered my anchor. The drive to Mercer Island took 30 minutes, the relentless Seattle rain finally beginning to slow to a heavy, oppressive drizzle. The affluent neighborhood was dead quiet, the sprawling multi-million-dollar homes hidden behind tall evergreen hedges and wrought iron gates. I pulled my Honda up the long, sweeping driveway of the house Bethany had bought. With her inheritance, the house Gregory had happily moved into, pretending it was his own kingdom. Only a single light was on, burning through the large bay window of the first-floor study. I cut the engine and sat in the dark for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. I wasn't afraid. The paralyzing grief that had anchored me to the mud at Oakwood Cemetery had entirely burned away, leaving behind a cold, sharp clarity. I pulled my spare key from my purse, wrapped my damp coat tight around my shoulders, and walked up to the heavy oak front door. The lock clicked open silently. I stepped into the grand foyer. The house felt entirely different without Bethany's warm presence. It felt like a tomb. A loud crash echoed from the back of the house, followed by the sound of shattering glass and a string of frantic, breathless curses. I walked down the hardwood hallway toward the study. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The room was utterly destroyed. Books were violently swept off the mahogany shelves, throw pillows were slashed open, and Bethany's antique desk was practically splintered. In the center of the chaos stood Gregory. He was no longer the polished, arrogant widower from the funeral. His expensive custom suit jacket was gone, his tie was ripped off, and his shirt was soaked in nervous sweat. He was desperately clawing at the wall, safe, hidden behind a framed landscape painting. "Looking for her emergency cash?" I asked, my voice cutting through the manic sounds of his destruction. Gregory spun around, his eyes wide and bloodshot, resembling a trapped, rabid animal. When he saw it was just me, his panic morphed into a flash of irritation. He tried, pathetically, to pull the mask of the grieving husband back over his face. "Clara," he breathed heavily, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What are you doing here?" I'm just trying to find some important documents for the probate lawyers. It's been an overwhelming day. I lost my job, Clara. They fired me over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I took a slow step into the room. "Like the misunderstanding with the earnest money ledgers, or the misunderstanding with Vanessa Croft in the back of your Mercedes?" The fake, sympathetic smile instantly dropped from his face. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him a sickly, pale gray. "How do you know about that?" "I know everything, Gregory," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the adrenaline surging through my veins. "I know about the offshore syndicate. I know about your $1.2 million debt. And I know about the $2.5 million life insurance policy you forged." He took a step toward me, his hands curling into tight fists. The danger in the room spiked, but I stood my ground. "Where did you get that information, Clara?" he hissed, his voice dropping into a menacing, guttural register. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The volume was turned all the way up. The audio from Bethany's dashcam filled the ruined study. "Gregory, what did you do?" My dashboard is flashing. The brake pedal is going straight to the floor. "What did you do to my car?" I paused it right before his chilling laugh could play. Gregory stared at the phone, his jaw trembling. The realization of his total destruction was slowly settling behind his eyes. "Give me that phone, Clara," he demanded, taking another menacing step forward. "Give me the phone and whatever drive you have, and I will let you walk out of here." I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "You don't understand, Gregory. I didn't come here to blackmail you. The drive is already gone. Thomas Reed at Zenith Mutual has it. He froze the payout 3 hours ago. Harrison Cole sent the escrow files to your managing directors this morning. I sent the photos to David Croft. Your life is already over. I just came here to watch the dust settle." He lunged at me. He was fast, driven by pure, unadulterated desperation. He grabbed me by the shoulders, slamming me hard against the wooden doorframe. Pain exploded in my back, but I didn't scream. I just looked up into his terrified, pathetic eyes. "You ruined everything!" he screamed, spit flying from his lips. "I am going to kill you, Clara. I'm going to kill you just like I." Suddenly, a blinding white light swept across the study windows, illuminating the room like a stadium. The low, heavy rumble of a massive engine vibrated through the floorboards. Gregory froze, his grip on my shoulders loosening. He looked toward the window, sheer terror washing over his features. A black Cadillac Escalade had pulled directly onto the front lawn, its headlights beaming straight into the house. 4 heavy car doors slammed in unison. "I think your creditors are here," I whispered, shoving him off me. Gregory stumbled backward, his bravado entirely evaporating. He looked like a frightened little boy. He ran to the window, peering through the blinds. "No, no, no," he chanted hysterically. "They're early. Silas gave me 24 hours. He said 24 hours. The heavy oak front door didn't just open. It was kicked off its hinges with a splintering crash that shook the walls. Heavy boots marched down the hardwood hallway. Gregory turned to me, tears streaming down his face, actually dropping to his knees. "Clara, please, hide me. They will kill me. Please, they're going to kill me." "Bethany begged you to help her," I said coldly, looking down at him. You laughed. 3 men stepped into the study. 2 were built like brick walls, wearing heavy leather jackets and carrying crowbars. The man in the center, Silas, was surprisingly thin, dressed in an immaculate gray suit, but his eyes were entirely dead. He assessed the ruined room, his gaze briefly flickering over to me before locking onto Gregory, who was cowering on the floor. "Gregory," Silas said, his voice terrifyingly calm and polite. "We heard some unfortunate news about your employment. And your insurance claim. My boss doesn't like it when our investments lose their liquidity." "Silas, listen to me," Gregory begged, crawling toward the man's expensive Italian shoes. "I can get the money. I own this house. It's worth $3 million. I'll sign the deed over to you right now. Just give me a week to push the paperwork." Silas looked intrigued. He turned to me. "Is that true? He owns this estate?" I smiled, shaking my head. "No. The house was purchased through a revocable living trust controlled by my late parents' estate. Bethany was the primary trustee. Upon her death, the trust stipulates that all physical assets immediately transfer to the secondary trustee, me. Gregory's name isn't on a single piece of paper. He has 0 equity here." Gregory screamed in frustration, burying his face in his hands. Silas chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Well, Gregory, it appears you are completely out of assets, which means we move to the penalty clause." Silas nodded to the 2 massive men beside him. "Take his hands first. He won't be signing any real estate contracts anyway." The 2 men lunged. Gregory shrieked as they dragged him into the center of the room. I didn't look away. I watched as the crowbar came down with a sickening crunch. Gregory's agonizing scream tore through the house, echoing into the rainy Seattle night. They hit him again, and again. The sound of breaking bone and wet, heavy thuds filled the air. Gregory begged for mercy, his voice quickly reducing to a gargling, breathless sob. Just as Silas raised his hand to signal them to move to his legs, the distant wail of police sirens pierced the night air. The sound grew rapidly louder, converging on the street outside. Harrison had timed the anonymous tip to the police perfectly. Silas cursed under his breath, adjusting his cuffs. He looked down at the bloody, broken mess of a man on the floor. You're lucky the cops are here, Hayes, but you can't stay in a cell forever. We have friends in King County lockup. You're a dead man walking." Silas and his men didn't panic. They swiftly moved down the hallway and slipped out the back door, vanishing into the wooded area behind the property just as red and blue lights flooded the front windows. Seconds later, 6 armed Seattle police officers burst into the study, their weapons drawn, shouting commands. They found me standing quietly in the corner, unharmed, and they found Gregory Hayes lying in a pool of his own blood, his hands completely shattered, weeping uncontrollably. As the officers roughly cuffed him, reading him his Miranda rights for the murder of Bethany Hayes, Gregory didn't fight back. He looked up at the officers with a bruised, swollen face and choked out a single, pathetic phrase. "Thank you. Please, take me away. Take me away." I walked out of the house into the cool, damp night air, leaving him to his nightmare. Gregory is serving life without parole at Walla Walla State Penitentiary. The syndicate made sure his time inside is a living nightmare. He spends his days in protective custody, terrified of his own shadow. Vanessa lost everything in the divorce and now works a minimum wage retail job. As for me, I took over Bethany's trust. I sit by her grave every Sunday. She is finally at peace.